Okay, it looks like we're live. I just have to do one more little sneak thing with Instagram to get us live on Instagram. They have a secondary little setup we have to do. There we go. All right. It looks like we're live. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Marissa here with the boat company, and I am here with the boat company's natural resources attorney, Paul Olson. Paul does amazing things for the boat company and has for a long time. He is so skilled and so just fascinating to speak with. I am so looking forward to this live stream and to really dig into a lot of topics that face the Tongass National Forest, which is the area that the boat company cruises in. As you all may know, the Tongass National Forest is about 17 million acres, but not all 17 of those million acres are forested or land. Some of them are waterways, about half and half. Paul will probably correct me more specifically on those details, but we have about half of that area is land and half of that area is water. So we'll be talking about what the boat company does. And obviously we cruise through the waterways of the Tongass National Forest. So we'll be talking about what we do to protect it, as we are a nonprofit cruise line, which is really super special and exciting. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Paul in here. And Paul and I have been backstage for a few minutes testing our connectivity, and we do have a little bit of a lag between us, but last time we did this, the lag caught up about a few minutes in, and we were good on timing. So just give us a little patience if you can. There might be some space between our conversation back and forth, but all right, Paul, without further ado, take it away. Can you tell us a little bit about what you'll be talking about today overall?
Shall I go, Marissa?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, looks like it. We got the delay. I'm Paul Olson. I've worked for the boat company in a number of capacities for about a decade and a half. Yeah, I hear you. Okay, Marissa, you hear me okay? Anyway, I'll talk about our big conservation programs that we've been working on for some time. Well, the boat company for over 40 years. That's why it was founded, was in large part to protect the natural resources of Southeast Alaska and the Tongass National Forest. Marissa did mention that I would correct her just a little bit. And yes, it is 16.7 million acres of land. That is the Tongass National Forest. It's the largest national forest in the United States. There are other lands in Southeast Alaska that may be owned by municipalities, by Native Alaskan corporations, and by the state of Alaska, but the Tongass National Forest is the largest chunk of the Southeast Alaska land base, and our waterways are also a massive resource and asset. There are a lot of things that have been going on with protecting the Tongass National Forest. One of Mike McIntosh's founding visions was to illustrate that you could get much more value out of it by using it for recreation than by clear cutting old growth forests. That's been proven over time, not just by the boat company, but through a number of economic studies that we review and force agencies to review on a regular basis. The things that have been going on over the last 15 years, the old growth timber industry has really shrunk, thankfully, because it was a taxpayer subsidized activity that benefited at the expense of all Southeast Alaskans and visitors. One of the key things that happened in 2001 was the announcement of the Roadless Rule, which is a United States Department of Agriculture policy that prohibits logging and road construction in what are called inventory roadless areas. Those areas are, when you visit aboard the boat company's boats, you almost will for sure step foot in one of those areas. They are the largest amount of the Tongass National Forest. And the Roadless Rule when they initially thought of it, they were going to exempt the Tongass National Forest. They did not. It's been in court ever since for about 25 years. The boat company has been involved in that since its inception. It seems like there have been a lot of lawsuits, but actually it's just a few that have taken a long time to resolve. In the late 2000s, the Department of Agriculture reversed the Tongass exemption, and the boat company, along with environmental organizations and tribal governments, sued to restore it. And finally, in 2015, in a case called Organized Village of Cake, which is a native village, versus United States Department of Agriculture, we prevailed. And the Roadless Rule became set in stone. But again, it's an administrative policy and regulation. And 3 years later, in 2018, the state of Alaska petitioned the Department of Agriculture to reverse it. And so they did. They again exempted the Tongass from the Roadless Rule, and the boat company, as well as commercial fishing organizations, other ecotour organizations, and Alaska Native villages sued. And we were in the final stage of that case when in 2021, the incoming Biden administration restored the Roadless Rule on the Tongass. So we were just about to win that case, but it became no longer necessary. But shortly thereafter, guess what? The state of Alaska and the timber industry again sued the Department of Agriculture for restoring the Roadless Rule on the Tongass National Forest. So this is where we are today. The boat company and commercial fishermen and ecotour operators and Alaska tribal governments and conservation groups all want the Roadless Rule to remain in place, but it has been sued over again. So we are back in court intervening on behalf of the United States government to maintain the Roadless Rule. This is in the latter stages of the case. Our attorneys, Earth Justice, a law firm in Juneau, founded by Mike McIntosh, the Alaska arm of Earth Justice, is representing us, and they have just filed our final reply brief. So we could expect a decision anytime. However, it's possible that the incoming administration may reverse the Roadless Rule again. And so we will be back to where we have been before. It's a really important thing for us. It protects our recreational assets. It protects fish and wildlife. It protects the climate regulation services that the Tongass National Forest provides. So that's one of the big issues that we're working on. The other big issue we're working on is the Tongass Forest Plan revision. Federal agencies must redo forest plans every so often so that they're up to date with ecological changes, changes in socioeconomics. One of those changes is the growth in the remote recreation industry in Southeast Alaska, Mike McIntosh's vision. It's happened. Everybody is enjoying the benefits of outdoor recreation, the benefits of wildlife viewing, the scenery, much more than has ever happened in the past, and we need to restore this. Right now, there is a pause on old growth logging on the Tongass National Forest. That's the only national forest that still allows it. Other national forests have shifted to recreation. You cannot log old growth on the Tongass National Forest north of us. We're the only one. But in 2021, the boat company, Uncruise, other ecotour operators, commercial fishermen, and tribes, we all wrote the Department of Agriculture letter, and we said, stop it. Please stop logging old growth forests in Tongass National Forest. And they did. For now. It was kind of interesting because this industry is so heavily reliant on outside processing. Outside companies do the logging, that it really doesn't have much effect on the local economy. I was a contractor for the boat company at the time, and I used to joke with people that I was one of the few private businesses in Southeast Alaska that suffered from this decision, because I was one of the few people that depend on old growth logging, because I would write comment letters telling them to stop it. It took away my job. Although I was happy for that. But those are our major Tongass issues that we're working on at this time. And I'll maybe turn it over to Marissa for questions.
Thanks so much, Paul, for explaining some of that to us. I think, overall, could you just reversing back, we talked about the roadless rule. You had mentioned the roadless rule, and then you had also mentioned the Tongass National Forest plan revision. Could you just circle back to us? Let's just start with the roadless rule. Could you just break down for us in layman's terms, in a slow manner for all of us, all of us non-lawyers or attorneys, could you just break down for us what the roadless rule is? I know that a particular administration put it into place to protect all of the national forests. It specifically applies to national forests. Again, correct me if I am wrong here. But could you just again say specifically what the roadless rule protects and what it does, what it prevents? It prevents people from coming in and doing a certain particular set of things. So can you explain that again one more time for us?
Yes, sure. The roadless rule, when they initially developed it, it's a nationwide rule, and what the Department of Agriculture had found was that they were building roads, publicly funded roads in national forest, much faster than they could repair the damage that they were doing. On most of these roads were for timber harvest, and what happens when you have a road and timber harvest and habitat? Well, obviously, when they do large clear-cut logging sales, which is what they do on the Tongass, it creates a wasteland, an ecological wasteland. But the roads are an issue too, because if not properly maintained, they're terrible for fish habitat. And there are about 5,000 miles of logging roads on the Tongass National Forest, exclusively used for industrial scale logging. And because the government has not had enough money to repair or maintain those roads, they are a constant source of sediment into fish habitat. Constant. It chokes, it literally gets in their gills and kills them. And also, whenever a road crosses a river, they have to put in a culvert. And a culvert is like a dam. Once it falls apart, it blocks. There are about 1,000 of them on the Tongass right now. They block hundreds of miles of salmon habitat, and this means that less salmon spawn. It means that when they're baby salmon, who live in the rivers for the first year of their lives, they can't move around a watershed. They can't escape floods. They can't find new places to feed. They're kind of trapped. And so this is a big problem, and the roadless rule prevents this from happening anymore. And it does not happen in places protected by the roadless rule. Also, Southeast Alaska has a lot of what we call iconic megafauna, like bears. You go up to see them on QU Island, the largest black bears in the world because they feed on salmon, the large brown bears on the Admiralty, Baranof, and Chichagof Islands. Remnants of polar bears, interestingly enough. But anyway, these animals are very sensitive to roads. All large predators are. It fragments their habitats. And what we've learned studying the Tongass's marvelous brown bears is that it's really hard on the females, because in a year when salmon abundance is lower, they need to be free from human interference. And the big males take the best spots. And so it requires females to expend more energy and means they're less likely to be successfully reproductive if they can't have a good spot at a salmon stream. And the roads fragment that habitat and cause them to be lost. It also enables unauthorized human take of bears, which is another unfortunate thing. So roads protect our salmon, they protect our wildlife, where the roadless rule does that. And its prohibitions on clear-cut logging protect our scenery. Our scenery is one of the things everybody comes to Southeast Alaska to see. You've got steep, rugged mountains, trees, and they do studies. I'm sending them to foresters all the time. People do not like to see clear cuts. They want to see forests. They want to experience forests and old-growth trees. So the roadless rule protects those things for everybody. Okay, Marissa.
Wonderful. We're working through this time lag perfectly. Thanks so much, Paul. I appreciate you kind of reclarifying what the roadless rule is. You know, when we at the boat company talk about it every day, all day, sometimes easy to get into the depths of it, and to take a step back and break it down takes some time. So I really appreciate you doing that for us and simplifying it. And as you mentioned, it was put into effect in 2001 from the Clinton administration. And that's when it started protecting the Tongass. And ever since then, we've been in court, as you said, working to keep those more roads from being created in our national forest, and as you can see, even affecting our waterways as a cruise line, but really just our desire is to protect the forest itself, and that goes all the way back to our founder, Michael McIntosh, who Paul has referred to a couple of times. Again, our founder is Michael McIntosh, who is no longer with us, but our organization, the boat company, is now run by his son, Hunter McIntosh, who was very close with his father and very much stands by all of the desires and hopes that Michael McIntosh had when he first established the boat company, again, to protect and as a nonprofit for the Tongass National Forest and Southeast Alaska. So we've been fighting ever since to continue protecting, and quite successfully, even though it's been in court, as I'm sure Paul feels the pain of, but it's been in court pretty consistently. But I think it's been pretty successful that we keep our foot in the door, if you will, and keep fighting along with a lot of other really lovely partners that have helped us. Paul also had referenced Earth Justice and the Alaska branch, and that is the legal firm that he mentioned is supporting and helping defend the Tongass currently, and that legal office was also supported and created by Michael McIntosh, if I say that correctly. And if I don't, please correct me on that, Paul, but I believe that is the correct answer. And so before I move on to the next point, actually, I will move on to the next point, but when you start answering my question, if you could please just make sure I was right about what I said about Michael McIntosh kind of starting Earth Justice's Alaska branch. But so now going into my next question is the Tongass National Forest plan revision that you spoke of. So let's break that down a little bit, because that's another situation that's happening currently, and it affects all of the forest resources. So how the forest is used in terms of recreationally, and in terms of like fishing, human uses, and other topics. So could you please go into the Tongass National Forest plan revision for us and explain kind of what the threats are there, and the effects of, and kind of a status update of what's happening right now with that plan revision?
Yeah, so the plan revision is going to be a multi-year process. It's probably going to take about 5 years. They're very early in that right now. But the current plan authorizes a lot of logging, even though I had mentioned that there's a pause on growth logging timber sales right now. So that's a serious concern. There currently, most of the logging will actually be areas that have previously been clear cut. They call them second growth forests, but logging them isn't very good either, because it's really bad for salmon habitat. And a lot of these places are places, well, tourism has grown. So what has happened is we've started using these places. QU Island, when guests go to Security Bay or Bay of Pillars or one of those areas, you'll often walk through those second growth forests, and you probably don't want to see them cut again. We won't be able to use it, and that will compress all tour operators into smaller areas. So it's very important for recreation use to have those forests grow back. They also sequester a lot of carbon, and as they're maturing, their carbon sequestration rate is going to accelerate very quickly. So it's useful to have them around for that. They do not provide the same degree of wildlife habitat as old growth forests, but they will in the future if allowed to fully mature. Some of the things we're going to look for is to improve habitat protection for salmon, where they do continue to allow logging. They have what are called 100-foot riparian buffers. These aren't big enough to protect salmon habitat, particularly in a little slightly more volatile climate that we're having now. So we want 300-foot buffers, which the Forest Service has in the Pacific Northwest. We want that. Also, they are allowed to log in what are called headwater streams. And the Tongass National Forest has a lot of fresh water. It's not just big rivers that influence the quality of salmon habitat, but it's these headwater streams that are very small. They may not even have salmon spawning in them, but they drain into all the bigger rivers and they control water quality, um, water temperature, which is an important thing to have good water flow to keep rivers from getting too hot for fish. So we want that to happen. We also want one of the things the captains and I have been working on. There's a loose organizations. We're trying to improve recreation infrastructure. What has happened is that recreation, despite being a much bigger business, is like the proverbial redheaded stepchild to the timber industry. So even though there's not much of a local timber industry, the Forest Service is still spending millions of dollars just planning timber sales, planning roads. Um, and for recreation, we were recently informed that it cost $500,000 to build a mile of trail. And our annual budget for that, for all eco-tour operators in Southeast Alaska, is $250,000. Um, that seems wrong to us because whenever we take people ashore, we pay the Forest Service for that, and it's good. It's fair and it's good that tour operators pay day use fees to agencies. They have management costs, they have infrastructure costs, but it doesn't seem fair to us that the Forest Service's budget goes to building timber sales that will never sell. These sales will lose money. Why would they not instead start building us a couple more loop trails in remote areas? Because it's our captains really have to work hard to find the best trip for everybody where we can give people the experience we want. And if we had a couple more trail systems, whether at Kelp Bay or even wildlife viewing facilities, perhaps at Kiu Island, where you could see the big black bears, um, all visitors to the Tongass would benefit, and it would be much better for all of our business models. So that is something a forest plan does, and that's something we are going to tell the Forest Service very loudly, that you need to allocate more of your agency resources to helping out recreation. And if they do that instead of timber, every other resource will benefit. Fish will benefit. People who gather food for personal use for their homes for food will benefit. So it's like if you're managing a forest for recreation, you're benefiting all sorts of other beneficial uses. Um, so that's one of the things we're working on. We will probably over time develop, we've occasionally had guests file comments on things like the roadless rule. And so we'll probably over time prepare materials for you. And if you're interested as a guest or for boat company staff and you're like, hey, Forest Service, knock off the old growth logging, build a trail instead. It's good for people's health. It'll reduce national health care costs. There are studies that prove that. We'll certainly help you with that opportunity. Okay, Marissa?
Thank you so much for that. And just to shed some light in case anyone's listening in who hasn't been on our cruise, what Paul is referring to has a lot to do with the nature of being on our cruises and the daily schedule. So we have a really special product and vacation offering, being on our cruise for 6 to 7 days, traveling between Juneau and Sitka, Alaska, in which we have 2 boats and 2 motor vessels, and each one of them is about takes one of them has 10 cabins and one of them has 12 cabins. So you can imagine the being on board with just about 20 other people is a pretty intimate experience, and with that comes a very intimate and dynamic schedule, meaning you can meet with our guest coordinator every day while you're on board and choose in the morning what your day is going to look like as an individual. So, depending on where we are on any given day, you would have the options to, either kayak or salt fish or stream fish, or hike with a naturalist into the woods and potentially pick berries, or learn about particular forests. So we aim almost every day crabbing. Every day we aim to get you feeling like you're in or on the Tongass in some degree, whether it's in the waters, literally not just on the boat, but perhaps even wading in the waters with your feet, or as you're stream fishing, or potentially walking through the forest. So, having these protections and having what Paul is saying, the ability to talk to the forest and say, we would like some more areas to go into the forest and hike with our guests. We would like to have more spots to take them through on the ground. So we are a different type of cruise line, whereas some other cruise lines just, you're on the cruise most of the time, and maybe one day you might get off and go somewhere. But we're constantly offering that option to get onto the ground, or into the ground that is part of the waterway. Oh, it looks like we're losing Paul for a minute there, so I'm gonna have to do some talking. Let's see if I can put my legal cap on. Oh, I hate that I lost him right after I did a bunch of talking, because now I'm gonna have to figure out what else to talk about. Well, while we're waiting for Paul to come back, let's go ahead and look at some of the comments that have been coming in. Let's see. Oh, we have John King. Hi, John. John is part of the boat company. Hi, guys. Just lagging a bit. So happy to see you both. Thank you so much for joining, John. And then let's see what else we have. I think we already put up here. Oh, we've got Paul back. That's so great. Paul, you had me on my toes. I almost had to start talking as if I was a lawyer, and I was very, very nervous. I'm going to keep talking in case he's still lagged. But in the meantime, I have a couple more comments coming in.
I'm
Oh,
still
we
here.
have. Oh, there he is. Okay. So I'm going to turn it back over to you in a second, Paul. Sorry. Now I'm reading John's comment. But so we have John again writing, our sales right now are amazing. We need everyone to come visit and help the fight. Yes. Thank you. Thanks for that, John. It's true. Part of how we're able to protect the Tongass is by having the largest part is by having you all come on board and having you all experience it, fall in love with it. And by joining us, you are supporting our nonprofit. We are a nonprofit. We are the only nonprofit cruise line. And therefore, we are, to date, we've put in over $30 million back into our protections of the Tongass National Forest. So just by joining us, you are supporting us. Which brings me to a point that I do want to bring up. Oh, and let me just say, Paul is right. John is right. Now I'm flipping you guys all the time. But John is right. We do have sales going on right now for the holidays. So we'll be offering a sale. We have a sale online right now. So if you all can check out our website, you'll see what we're offering. It's very exciting. Some sales for our 2025 departures. Really, really great rates. So I'm going to hide that comment from John now. So it's back to me and Paul. But this actually brings up a point that I really wanted to ask you, Paul, because we had someone write in when we announced that this live stream was going to happen. We had someone email us and ask if they could please have some more information about, let's see, let me just pull it up so that I know exactly what he wrote. What can lay people do to support your work aside from making donations? Paul, can you help explain to us what, I know you just touched on it, but could you help explain to us other ways that lay people can help support our work aside from directly making a donation on our website or potentially coming on board with us?
Yeah, you bet. Probably to engage in the process. Both the Roadless Rule and the Tongass Plan revision are public processes run by the Department of Agriculture and Forest Service. And so there will be opportunities for the public to comment, and we will be preparing, probably you and I and Hunter will be working together on outreach materials for that. I sent you something, America. If someone wants to email Marissa or someone else from the company, John, whoever, there we now have a document that gives you a link to where you can sign up for updates on the plan revision. Right now, there's no public comment period regarding the roadless rule because it's in court. Unless it is reversed again by the incoming administration. And at that point, there would be another public process if they reverse the roadless rule yet again, not the Tongass exemption. And that's very important. Lots of Americans commented on that rule. As a matter of fact, over 97% of them, I mean, there were thousands of people, asked the Forest Service to apply the roadless rule to the Tongass National Forest and protect it for all the resource values the boat company has been fighting for 40 years. Fish, wildlife, healthy outdoor recreation for all Americans. So that is something that people should comment on, educate people about it. I guess probably to educate yourself is an interesting concept, because one of the things the boat company has been highlighting for years about the Tongass National Forest and industrial logging is it's done at a massive taxpayer loss. It's not just the administrative costs, the taxpayers pay for the roads. And again, all these raw logs get cut down, they get exported overseas. There is a very small local timber industry. That's not a big deal. Mom and pop operations, we're talking about cutting down thousands of acres of old growth forest or second growth at once, sending it overseas on the dime of American taxpayers. So it's, for people to be aware of that. We're not stopping honest, mom and pop workers. We're destroying our exponentially more valuable fish, wildlife, and recreational habitat to support timber mills in foreign countries. It's not a sustainable practice. And people, and just to be educated about how unique and special the wildlife you're seeing up in the Tongass. There was once a guy, I think Hunter once went to this island called the Galapagos in South America at one time, and I think there was some scientist that was there during the 19th century and wrote a bunch of stuff about evolution, and once commented that islands are unique ecosystems, and they are. The species that are on island ecosystems have often lived in them for centuries, and they don't interact with other animals like they do on continents. They're called endemic mammals, and most of the Tongass species are. As I mentioned, the brown bears on Admiralty, Baranof, and Chichagof Island that our boats often take people to view respectfully from a distance, they're polar bears. They just got stranded on those islands during the Ice Age, and so when the glaciers receded, there they are, and they have this special advantage over all other bear populations in the world of salmon. Interestingly, it's part of the reason there's so many deer on those islands, because bear normally eat deer, but there's so many salmon, they don't have to. They can just gorge on salmon, and of course, it's berries. They eat other things in the spring, but it's a pretty amazing habitat. So just thinking of how amazing the salmon are and the amount of species they support. I mean, when the bears, there's literally a time of year when everybody eats salmon because the bears just eat the bellies. They're the best part. They just eat the bellies and they throw the carcass ashore, and other animals that could never catch a salmon get to eat them. It's like having the benefit of a commercial fisherman catch you a king salmon that you can serve on the boat.
Wow.
So it's there's a lot of things you do just to enjoy the learning about the ecosystem, and we can take advantage of opportunities when federal agencies allow for us to comment and tell them, knock off the bad stuff, protect the good stuff.
Absolutely. That's beautifully
Okay,
said.
Marissa.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's such a wonderful answer. I hope that our guest who had emailed us in that question is pleased with that answer. I love it. Paul, I have a question for you. This is something that I would love to know. Selfish question, but what do you think it is? It sounds like there's been a lot of really wonderful success that we've had as a company with our partners and our partnerships in fighting these lawsuits and aiming to protect the forest. I know that the forest is still in jeopardy, that it's still up to be unprotected, but so far it's remained fairly protected through our efforts with our partners. And I wanted to ask you if you think there's anything specific that you think helped and continues to help us be successful in protecting the forest.
I think I lost a little bit of that, Marissa, but I think your question had to do with what has helped to make this work effective. And it's probably that a lot of people feel the same way, including people who, not just visitors, but people who live in Southeast Alaska. It's, I've done presentations like this in other contexts, and I've been reminded a couple times of the Tlingit and Haida people who have lived there for thousands of years, and this is something we work with them on. Their cultures they're a very successful culture in part because Southeast Alaska is such a rich ecosystem. They've managed the salmon for thousands of years. They've done things like, they're like, well, we want salmon later in the year, so they planted chum. There's one river near Haines. It's famous. The Chilk. People should visit that area. The boat company doesn't go there, but it's certainly worth a side trip. They planted chum there so they would have a late fall run, and today it feeds thousands of eagles. Because they found a warmer river where chum would persist until December. They come in really late, and it's a national festival. So we work with them. They're very attached to protecting the land. Commercial fishermen, we work very closely with one commercial fishing organization that's been extremely active protecting the Tongass because they know if you destroy too much habitat, you're going to lose the resource. And as much as we have the healthiest salmon ecosystems in the world, other than Bristol Bay and some remote parts of Russia, we've lost a lot of fish to industrial scale logging, and particularly cohos, which is what guests get the opportunity to fish for in, well, often beginning in July, but they grow about a half pound every 2 weeks. So it's the best fishing for the largest fish at the end of the season shoulder trips. If you want to catch a nice 7-8 pound coho, Brent and Dylan and the guys will hook you up at the end of the season. Those are such great eating. They're a delicious fish, but they have unique habitat interests as opposed to other salmon, and so they're very vulnerable to industrial logging. They do spawn in smaller streams where timber industry can drop a log right down on them. They spend a little bit more of their life cycle in fresh water than many other salmon species, so they're more vulnerable that first year of life to the culvert thing that I mentioned. So obviously fishermen have a vested interest in this, commercial fishermen, because if they catch the cohos, and the boat company, when you eat a meal on a boat company vessel and it's fish, it's caught by local commercial fishermen, small scale businesses. So we work with them a lot. There's been a conservation groups have been in Southeast Alaska very active since the 1980s. There are a couple people from Sitka and Mike McIntosh who founded the largest of them, the Southeast Alaska Conservation Council, back in 1980. So that's how long we've been involved with that, and we will be certainly working with them in trying to protect the forest, do this forest plan revision and roadless rule process, and our colleagues in the ecotour business. We now write comments for them on Forest Service initiative. The boat company takes the lead, but they join with us, and they didn't used to be involved in that, but they've seen, their businesses have grown, and there's only so many places where we all can go and have outdoor recreation experiences, and so they've developed this interest in working with us to protect the forest for the benefit of their guests as well. So it's a large group effort. That's part of what makes it successful. The other thing that's going on that we're not responsible for, but it's part of it, is the economics of the timber industry are very bad right now. So they, like I mentioned earlier, the Forest Service loses money on these timber sales. So it's helped us that there's less of an economic incentive to take too much timber. It's very costly to operate in Southeast Alaska. It's far away from markets, so it's difficult to have a manufacturing industry. It's outdoor recreation and small scale commercial fishing. That's the economy of the region. And so we're glad to be a part of it and to help try and preserve the habitat that supports those economies. Okay.
Thank you so much, Paul. So I have two topics that I want to talk to you about before we end. I cannot believe it is already 40 minutes in here. So one is trawling, fishing trawlers, and what is going on there, and how that affects Southeast Alaska, what's been done about it. And then I want to jump into climate change. I know I am sure that we have guests that want to know about how climate change has been affecting our area. And I know that, you and I had talked about and brainstormed some ideas, or excuse me, not ideas, but some actual situations that have been occurring due to climate change in our area. So I will first start with the trawling and ask you to please cover the trawling for us and kind of what fishing trawlers are. If you could just start by breaking down what a fishing trawler is and how that affected Southeast Alaska, and if it's still affecting our area or not so much. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Paul.
Yeah, so many of our guests like to go fishing. It's an important feature of our tools. I'm actually a small boat commercial fisherman during the summer. I've operated a commercial fishing boat for 30 or 40 years, and I fish with hooks. Um, there are some small scale commercial fishermen that fish with pots or nets, and then there are trawlers. Trawlers are giant factory boats for the most part that tow giant nets the size of a jet airplane over the bottom of the ocean, tearing up trees. There are forests under the ocean as well, tearing up sediments and killing everything that they contact. That's not the way we like to fish in Southeast Alaska. We respect our fish. We try and catch only those species that we are going to sell. And there's no trawling in Southeast Alaska. It was banned by one of our commercial fishing organization partners years ago. And I sometimes joke to their executive director, who's also a friend of Hunter's, Linda Bacon. I said, the only thing you did wrong, Linda, you didn't make it big enough. And it would have been politically impossible for her to do that. But trawling goes on in the Gulf of Alaska, which is the area north and west of Southeast Alaska, and in the Bering Sea. And why this is a problem for us is that they catch migratory fish species, halibut, salmon, and others that would otherwise swim on down to Southeast Alaska, British Columbia, Washington State. In other words, they affect every fishery downstream and they kill large numbers of salmon and halibut, which are, the two most iconic species that are notable to us. But that's just scratching the surface. That's just how they directly affect Southeast Alaska sport harvest and commercial harvest. They fish in a part of the Bering Sea known as the halibut nursery. Commercial fishermen and sport fishermen cannot fish there because it was closed off to them to protect baby halibut. But the North Pacific Fishery Management Council allows trawlers to kill roughly 500,000 5-pound halibut a year there. Halibut that would otherwise leave the Bering Sea, grow up, swim down here, and spawn. It takes them, they have an interesting life cycle. After they're being born in the Bering Sea, they will mature, and I think the females spawn at about 10 years of age. Males are small. It's the females that grow big to have all those eggs. All the big halibut are females, and they will release those eggs at some point in their life cycle into the Gulf of Alaska, and those eggs will float with the current back to the Bering Sea. So when the trawlers are killing all these fish, they're harming the resource. And right now it's at precariously low levels. It's not at levels where we have to stop fishing for halibut in Southeast Alaska, but the restrictions are the tightest they have ever been. and that's because we're managed on abundance. Um, the boat companies worked a lot on trawling. Right now, our folks on Tongass National Forest because of the things that are important right now. But we had to jump into a lawsuit because for years, ourselves, Alaska Native stakeholders, and others were working to get the Bering Sea trawlers to limit their, it's called bycatch, the halibut they kill, to limit their bycatch based on abundance. They didn't like it. We finally got a regulation through and they sued. So we all had to go and we won. The limits are still too high. It's still a problem, but we maybe we'll engage in that at some time again in the future. But that's why they also, I should add, they kill a lot of king salmon, and our king salmon populations are actually recovering at this time, but they're very vulnerable because the trawlers can catch in the Gulf of Alaska, they catch 20 or 30,000. It's a pretty special fish, and we can't fish for them the first 6 weeks of our season for conservation reasons, yet they can. So those are the types of things, the ways that trawling affects us. These species are not in the best condition they've ever been as stocks, and they're still allowed to kill them. It's sad. It's just sad. I see a comment or U.S. senators supportive of efforts. It's interesting with the trawl issue. It's because the biggest trawlers are in Washington State, and Washington State senators who are Democrats are very hesitant to regulate trawling. Alaska senators uh, well, actually, the Senator Ted Stevens that tried to restrict it years ago. The boat company quotes him all the time. He's a Republican, so it's a weird dynamic how senators feel about trawling. But I guess the bottom line is it's a big industry, and they pay a lot of money, make a lot of campaign contributions. I've seen them, so that's a big challenge for getting reforms done at the legislative level. Alaska did elect a Democrat named Mary Peltola 2 years ago, and she ran on trawl bycatch, but she did not win this previous election. But she was very supportive of our efforts. She lives in a community in the Bering Sea where they don't have salmon anymore, and the only people allowed to kill salmon up there are trawlers. So it's a sad thing, but I'm sad she did not win again. I don't know I'd say they give lip service at the U.S. Congress level. At the state legislative level, it's very different. State legislators are very concerned about trawl bycatch because it affects their constituents. Trawling is not an Alaska industry in the state, except in the community of Kodiak. Most of it is 5 Seattle companies. And so there's at the state legislature, there are constantly initiatives and resolutions saying, and I'll flip it back to you for climate change, Marissa.
Yes. Okay. So thanks so much, Paul. I appreciate all of that insight, and thanks for answering that question from Mr. Byers. We appreciate the question too. Thank you. We love all of the questions and the feedback that we get from you all. We really appreciate it. So Paul, I want to just, in our last few minutes here, just try to touch on climate change. When you and I were talking about this live stream ahead of time, you had mentioned a few areas of what climate change is affecting for our area, and you mentioned that it's impacting salmon. You impact that our trees are changing, that the amount of freezing days are changing. You also mentioned that it would obviously then end up affecting travel dates, and that as the storms come in a little bit earlier in the winter. And also you had mentioned ocean acidification. So I just kind of want to, if you can touch on a couple of those things for us, we'd greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Alaska is warming more than a lot of the planet, more rapidly, and some of the changes that are happening in Southeast Alaska are changes in the seasons and in the cryosphere, which is the portion of the planet that is stored in ice or snow. When you are seeing Southeast Alaska scenery, you probably enjoy the snow-capped mountains, and they're going to be there for a while. But it is definitely one of the big things that is happening is spring is happening earlier. And what I mean by spring happening earlier, the snow melts. There's less snow cover, and snow cover has a huge influence on a lot of things in Southeast Alaska, including trees, because there's a the winter is normally right around the freeze thaw cycle all the time, and there are tree roots that actually get injured by freezing. So the snow cover insulates them, and that's yellow cedar, which is a important cultural tree for Native Alaskans. It's a beautiful wood for building things, and it has a lot of ecological values. They're dying off. It's actually the largest tree die-off in the world, and they're dying off because they don't have the snow cover at low elevation areas that used to be there, and the roots are freezing. It's also affecting when berries wake up. Because berries are supposed to wake up at the same time as pollinators, and now that's not happening. So one of our guides really likes to eat berries on the trails and teach people about them. And he may be finding, that's Christian who we had last time, he may be finding there are times when you'd normally think he'd see them in a specific spot and they're not there. And that's probably because there's a mismatch in timing. The same thing happens with the salmon, because the spring flow starts earlier now. So salmon are like, oh, the water temperature is just right for us to go out to sea. Well, it is in the river, but it's not in the marine environment where they go feed. So they show up in the marine environment before the feed does, and that's part of the problem. It's a mismatch in timing. All these species are going to attempt to evolve and adapt, and many of them will if we provide for them intact habitat. If we don't allow industrial logging to, so that they can just have to adapt to climate rather than other things. And when you're seeing these tidewater glaciers, they provide habitat for a lot of species too. The birds, the harbor seals. There are places where the harbor seals are going to have to move. Like maybe even in Endicott when you see them. Like the studies call it last chance tourism, that people are enjoying seeing these tidewater glaciers. Good news is that the higher elevation glaciers are going to be stable for a while. Whatever level of warming continues for the decade, and they're going to help protect salmon because those systems are actually too cold to be productive for salmon. So salmon will have glacially fed rivers that will gradually become a little bit warmer, but they can adapt to it. So if we can, maintain habitat, species will adapt. The other thing that happens is weather extremes. The snowfall, although the snow cover season's shorter, the snowfall might stay the same because all the moisture ends up in the atmosphere from warming. And it means you get more precipitation. So they've had some pretty radical snowfalls in Southeast Alaska. I lived there for years. I live in the mountains of Washington now, and we're seeing the same phenomenon. You're getting some unprecedented snowstorms, and for maintaining the freshwater ecology, that's not a bad thing. That's just a bad thing for human safety. And that's what they're having in the fall in Southeast Alaska is atmospheric rivers. People who live on the West Coast of the United States are very familiar with them. They're a good thing and a bad thing. They're a good thing because they're essential to the Western United States water cycle. They're a bad thing when they hit too hard and they cause floods, which they do. And when they hit Southeast Alaska, basically an atmospheric river is it's a river of water vapor, fast moving, driven by wind, and they're increasing in frequency and intensity. And when they hit a mountain range like Southeast Alaska or the Sierra Nevadas, it's the same phenomenon. They crash and burn, and all that precipitation gets dumped at once. And in Southeast Alaska, it's causing landslides, dangerous ones, avalanches. So it's like their version of forest fires that we have here on the east side of the Cascades. It's the environmental extremity that's a big risk. But protecting the Tongass National Forest is one thing we can do to mitigate that a little bit because it's the global champion of carbon sequestration. It sucks a lot of carbon dioxide out of the air. So that's one thing we can do. And keeping those trees, reduce landslide risk, Landslides don't just affect people, they go into the rivers and block off salmon habitat. The Clinkets and Haidas have been clearing them for years, and that may be something, thinking about the forest.
Okay, I'm not sure. I wish our connection was better, but I heard all of that towards except for the very end. But I did see that you handed it off to me, so hopefully everybody else heard the end of that there. But that was, I wish I could talk to you all day, Paul. You have so much fascinating knowledge about this. It's like you've become a, to be an attorney in anything, it's like you have to be the absolute expert in that field, and you just know so much about, the ecological issues in the Tongass. So you're just such an amazing resource. I wish that we could talk to you like once a week and do a live stream about once a week just to hear all of the latest updates. But well, I did mention ocean acidification. So since I did that, I know we're at time now, but we did start a few minutes late. So I don't want to leave anybody bummed if they heard me say ocean acidification and then we didn't talk about it. Would you mind just touching on ocean acidification for us? And then the very last thing I want to mention is just if you could talk about, you teased me at the end of our last conversation. You mentioned that you have a honey time of year to go to Southeast Alaska, one that you like the most for yourself. So if you could first just mention ocean acidification, and then we can just end on hearing about what your favorite time, your quote unquote honey time to visit Southeast Alaska is. Back over to you, Paul.
Sure. Well, ocean acidification is another side effect of increasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. As we mentioned previously, the Tongass National Forest and other temperate rainforests in the world suck that carbon dioxide out of the air and they store it. So that's a good thing, mitigates climate change. And the same thing, the oceans suck even more carbon dioxide out of the air and they store it. The problem with that is it reduces ocean pH, or in other words, makes the ocean more acidic. Um, this is a certain process. There's not a lot that's unpredictable about it, and it's a long-term process. But why it's bad for marine life is it affects what they call calcifying organisms, or organisms with shells, which you would know as crab, clams, shrimp, corals, a lot of marine life. And these impacts aren't here today, but they're coming and they've hit some places. And what happens is when the ocean becomes acidic, it dissolves the materials that those marine critters use to build their shells. And when they are unable to build shells, they will suffer mortality. And it's predicted to be fairly significant for many crab species and also forage fish species. There's a species called pteropods. They're ubiquitous throughout the planet. They feed a lot of animals, and they are probably going to be one of the first things to be radically affected. They found serious acidification and shell dissolution off the coast of California. There's a California current that upwells a lot of acidic water from the depths of the ocean, and that happens in the Gulf of Alaska at times. Right now, our waters are not too acidic to support shellfish, but it's something they expect. Like they like king crab, which is a very popular species, Bering Sea deadliest catch, right? They're king crab in Southeast Alaska too. They may not make it to the end of the century because they've done laboratory tests. That's how they can tell. So that's a scary thing. We're not sure how it's going to affect fish. It's generally bad for fish, but some will adapt to it. It may be a food web issue for many, like for salmon and halibut. Some species benefit actually, well, not from ocean acidification, but from ocean warming. Some species are more prolific, like sablefish and herring, and forage fish. That's helpful for other species. But going back to the honey time of the year, as a longtime boat owner, I have done the same stuff that the boat company's captains and crew and contractors do every year, and that's pretty up the boat with paint. And in order to do that in Southeast Alaska, you need dry material to apply paint to, and sunshine. And May has increasingly become a really pleasant month. There's a lot of neat things about it. One of the things, it may be climate change, it may be something else, but we're increasingly getting northwest winds in May. They're really two prevailing wind patterns: southeast, which is wet, and northwest, which is dry often and brings sunshine. And it'll, when this lasts for like 4 or 5 days, it's just beautiful. It's not too hot. The northwest bring in sunshine, and often they'll start out the day misty, maybe a little misty, maybe a little foggy, and then by 1 in the afternoon it breaks and you've got a beautiful day. And there's such long days that you can take advantage of whatever portion works best for you. But anyway, we love them because, 5 days of northwest winds, we get to paint the boat this week. But it's also a less crowded time. We have a lot more large cruise ships in Juneau and Sitka than ever. They've always been large cruise ship port, but when there's several in those towns at once, they can overwhelm the communities. But when you're there in May, you'll beat those biggest crowds, and so you will have picturesque communities with lots of friendly people that you can walk through without having to wade through 2,000 other people. So you'll get the town activities, and you'll get the weather diversity. Yeah, it's just a special time of year. I feel like and they're long days, so you'll get to experience, almost darn near the solstice. I think that's always a special event for our people to, see it not get dark until 11 at night. Pretty neat.
So thank you, Paul. I actually was really excited to ask this question, and I didn't get a chance to tell you, what my thought was when we were talking about this ahead of our live stream. But when you had mentioned, that your favorite time of year in Southeast Alaska is May and June, I got really excited because I don't know if you know where our reservations are at and where we have openings, if you're as plugged into the bookings side and what our schedule looks like. But we do have some openings in the earlier trips, which begin in May. And it's actually, those are our trips. I think it's trips 1 through 5 are our trips that have sale prices on them right now. So that's actually really ironic. And I was pretty pleased to hear that those were your favorite times of year, because everybody has different reasons for liking different times of year throughout the summer. Excuse me, throughout this our season in Southeast Alaska. But it was pretty cool when you said that yours were May and June, when I know that that's when our sales are. So that's pretty exciting that we had really cool Black Friday and Cyber Monday sale on a lot of our trips. But we do have a remaining sale that we have left up on trips, I believe 1 through 5. And trip 1 is definitely, I know, part of it is in May. So, and I think we do have some spots left there. So if anybody wants to check that out, go ahead and go to theboatcompany.com/reserve, or just theboatcompany.com, and you'll find it. And I should change this banner actually to theboatcompany.org, but either .org or .com will take you to the same place, but we are officially theboatcompany.org. But either one will push you to the same place. So don't worry if you have a .com or a .org. And Paul, with I'm going to do one last thing to you that you didn't expect, but I saw what you're wearing, and since I've been doing marketing and been doing a little bit about working on our merchandise store a little bit, I want you to just, if you can, just show everyone your sweater. Oh, and the bottle you're drinking out of. I did see that earlier. And he has a great hoodie that says, what is it? Cruise, Fish, Explore, Protect. I might not have it in the right order, but something like that. Can you give us a view of that? Cruise, Fish, Explore, Protect. Okay, I was close. So and we got a nice cool logo on the back, and I have one of those hoodies. Oh, that's the 40th anniversary commemorative hoodie. Yeah. So it has a really cool 40th on the side there for when we were 40 years in which is couple years ago. So that was really exciting. That's a limited run, and we do have some more of those sweaters left. But we also did roll out some new merchandise. So if you want to check us out, this time I wrote theboatcompany.org /merch -shop, or you can just go to theboatcompany.org. It's pretty straightforward. You can get to our shop, or you can get to our reserve page from there. Thank you all so much. I think we just had like 1 or 2 more comments come in. Just April saying, thanks for everything today. What a lovely live stream. So informative. Thank you so much, April, for joining us. And one more I didn't get a chance to check out from Bill. He said it's frustrating that we have to continue to fight to protect such beautiful natural resources like the Tongass, as well as others like Bristol Bay. Yes, it is. But Paul is crushing it. And all of our partners we're just so blessed, and we're doing the very best we can. And as Paul answered Mr. Byers' question, there are a lot of ways you can help, not only by joining us on a trip or donating, but just emailing us and putting your name on that. I think it's a petition, or I don't know what the proper terminology is for it, but thank you all so much. We really appreciate your time, and thank you, Paul. And I'll let you say a formal goodbye, Paul. And but that'll be it from me. Thank you, everybody, and I'll let Paul say goodbye.
Yeah, thanks everybody for listening. I think I got locked up. Okay, I got locked up.
That's okay. We can still hear you.
Oh, okay. My screen looks locked up. Well, thanks everybody for participating today, and we look forward to doing this again sometime. There's no end to the battles trying to protect our natural resources, and take all the help we can get.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Paul. Yeah, we can hear you just fine. It was just your screen. Well, thank you, everyone, and we'll end here. All right. Bye-bye.